Hi, and welcome to our chat today. We're joined by Dr. Edward Duca, project lead at SciCulture and coordinator of the Science in the City Festival in Malta and lecturer of science communication at the University of Malta. And Dr. Annette Klinkert, director of the UC Science Communication Network and CEO of City to Science, so a science festival organization scheme. We're going to be talking about how the coronavirus has impacted science communication events and how we're going to move forward in science communication. So can you both tell me how you came to the decision to actually cancel your events? Because obviously now we've gone into full lockdown, but previously you probably had to think about when was the time to actually cancel, or so could you both just talk about that a little bit?
Annette, do you want to go first?
I can go first, yeah. There are different formats of events that are all affected now by the COVID crisis. So let me start with the classical science communication conferences that needed to be cancelled for our European network. So this discussion started very, very early because the conference was scheduled for the week after Easter. So we had to postpone it until the end of October. And even now people start discussing on whether we may have to schedule this conference as an online event or even move it to next year. So all these conferences are now thinking about digital ways of getting together. But since we are a network representing a lot of science festival organizers, a lot of our members are now affected in events being cancelled or moved. So we have a broad discussion, even more intense than we ever went together as a network in these weeks, because we are all sitting in the same boat. So we are all affected by the very same challenges, which is exciting at the end and an opportunity at the same time, because if one of us has a solution for something, then all the others can adopt it and can work with it. So what we are discussing now is whether to create new festival formats which are no longer happening in real life situations, but either completely digital events or hybrid events. So that's my favorite right now, thinking about hybrid versions where you can do things in the cities with the people, go to where the people are, but at the same time offer digital opportunities to join in. The questions we all have right now is whether we can create a sense of community, because a festival is all about community, experiencing something together, learning together. And we are all discussing now, do we have a sense of community if we go digital? Then how can we provide equal access for a lot of different audiences, which is always a problem for science festivals, which often address only academic families. So by being outside in the city, in the street, in the squares, you can reach out to broader audiences. And we need to find ways of doing that in a digital sphere. Then it's also, can we have engagement in these science festivals? That's a big topic for all of our festivals now. So we can inform people, we can set up videos and all kinds of talks online, but this is not really engaging and hands-on, which we all love in the festivals. So this is just a broad overview of the challenges we see. The way we cope with it as the European network is to get together in two different formats, which we have now created. One is the UC Bistro, which is a 1-hour cup of coffee gathering where we get together, exchange how we're doing, how we're feeling, what kinds of topics we would like to discuss. And as an add-on to these meetings, people asked for a longer workshop, which we now called the UC Hot Pot, in which everybody brings in an ingredient, and Edward was one of the first who contributed as a speaker to these kinds of hot pot gatherings. And it's good to see that like 40 people joined from all over Europe to discuss the future of digital or hybrid events. So that's a good development that we see right now. But Edward, how about you?
Well, in Malta, we did have to cancel many things. Obviously, the most prominent one is SciCulture itself. We were meant to have a course quite around this time, 5-day intensive course about science, arts, and entrepreneurship, bringing people together to address big societal challenges. So an aspect of science communication, public engagement, but also introducing a lot of other disciplines. Cancelling that wasn't easy, taking that decision. It was very hard. It affected dozens of people from all over Europe. We even had people who were willing to pay to come to SciCulture, and we had to tell them no. It was nice to see that, but obviously the consequences of that are significant. The whole team has been working remotely. Some people from the team handled that better than others. There's different personalities. And we've canceled, I think, about probably 8 engagement events. We did puppet theater with children, Kids Like Science, canceled that. Science cafes canceled, science and film events canceled as well. That was a hard time to go through. Now, Malta has actually dealt with the COVID pandemic really well. So things are starting to open up again. Things are starting to open up in Europe. The future looks bright, but it also provided other opportunities. Like I really enjoyed, Annette, the EUSEA bistros, and I know I didn't attend all of them, but the ones I attended, seeing all these people from around the world coming together on a Zoom chat to, sometimes even like, look, we're suffering as well. We're all going through this together. It's very reassuring, and very reassuring that the network would provide that. We did have some good things, like we got some volunteers to help on our STEAM experiments website. So that's something we've created through another EU project. And people it wasn't many, it was like 3, but it was nice to see that there were some people in the community, completely voluntary, something we've set up over a year ago, and they're willing to spend a few hours to upload some more experiments so people can do them at home. And that provided a new opportunity. We've had to adapt some of our proposals in a way that I'm really excited about. We're doing this large-scale science and arts community installation as part of Science in the City with the University of Chicago and the Valletta community. Valletta Design Cluster are involved. And we're trying to change this now into an online virtual community meetings, artists, and so on. And that transcending into a virtual science and art exhibition that more people can actually input and help develop. And then next year having something physical. So going through this process and allowing more co-creation, all these really important values in the science communication community. There is some good news. European Researchers' Night is still going ahead. And actually we've released our internships late this year, releasing them when everything was just crumbling, because that's how it felt, even if on retrospection, maybe we can reframe that as new opportunities of how to come together. I've never seen the Sci Com community disunited. Then, and thinking really holistically, should we do an online, festival or online engagement as people from all over Europe or the world? Should we create these spaces that festivals can be in, which is interactive? Some people were mentioning, new software we need to create for performers to engage in a better way online. Science communicators.
Do you think that this is going to be a necessity for going on in the future, that you're going to have contingency plans to include like an online presence for all festivals, for all events, just in case the worst happens again?
In fact, that's what the Edinburgh Science Festival, one of the biggest festivals, and the UC hotspot, mentioned that they're now planning that all of their events have an online component and the physical one, this hybridization. There were some really cool ideas, like Vire Stewart from the University of St. Andrews mentioned that, they're working with people to see, what animals, what nature exists in their backyard, and sharing that and doing experiments with that, learning about that, still using this thirst for knowledge that human beings seem to have. We want to do something similar actually in Malta, working with an NGO called Greenhouse. So
what we see also in the festivals that we organize, this moment of going having a hybrid version, online version, plus something that you actually do, if it's possible, in the parks, on the squares, in the neighborhoods. This will be sustainable in a sense that you can still look at it after the festival, so you can create materials and resources which then schools can use, or families or other people can use. And we see an interesting phenomenon happening right now with Science Night Ruhr, which we are responsible for coordinating together with the Ruhr Regional Association. This festival is quite large, covering 9 cities, and about 400 scientists are involved in that. And they are now really in the mid of the process of making a digital version this year, because they say at the end of September, everything is still so unclear that we really don't know whether we can do it. So they had to decide, do we cancel it or do we have a digital version this year? And this is what they try now with the support of EUSEA. So they join every single network meeting right now and try to get qualified. And they do see it as an opportunity to train scientists in the digital communication as well. So, but they don't have this economic challenge as much as other people do who organize science festivals, because as a regional policy-making partner, they can take the risk, and I really encourage them to do so, to try out something, even if it doesn't work right away. And this is what I see in these exciting times, that it's a time of experimentation, of trying out something new without knowing where this will be ending. And we've just received a call to prepare another science festival for a city in our region, where we want to combine the city's topics and history and venues and museums and churches into a science festival that will happen next year, which is also going to be a hybrid version, both digital and in the real space. But what I also see in all these discussions that we see now is a discussion about what are we actually doing? So why is engagement needed, and where do we maybe need a fresh up of our approach, which we can do in these times? Because what we see in COVID-19 is that STEM and technology are not the only solutions to challenges. So we do need the virologists, of course, but we also need people who tell us something about sociology, about psychological effects, about economic effects, so about the role of culture in our society. So I think the focus that many of us have on communicating STEM alone is no longer appropriate if we want to show science as being contextualized in our societies. So maybe we can use these kind of a break in between to reconsider what we're doing in the first place. So that's an opportunity for the community, not just to postpone and do the very same things online, but to reconsider what do we need to reflect and where's the role of science in the society in solving challenges like a virus or climate change or mobility or whatever comes up.
This issue that, some of these festivals have been happening or events have been happening for decades now. Having that time to reflect and be, is this the most appropriate thing? What do we stand for? What are our values? When there's something like COVID-19 spreading throughout the whole world, do we really want to be focusing on an event which could be interesting, could be exciting, but is not really addressing that key issue of empowering citizens, of working with citizens to, right now we do have an issue of this whole concept of an informed democracy. You know, the things you're seeing in America, how news is manipulated, how public opinion is changed by both autocratic and democratic governments in order to suit the needs of who is in power. And what role does science communication, what role does something like SciCulture have in that, I think is a big question and a big issue. You know, obviously it's really important to be organizing astronomy events and these things that give us a reflection of what it means to be human, and maintains our drive. But also there are deep issues within how things are communicated that need to be studied, need to be known, so we know our role also as a community within this society. You know, when something like this happens, what should a science communicator do? What should a design thinker? I've seen people, you know, shift research topics using their skills for modeling and stuff like this, just to create basic websites for people to get better information about our values and flattening the curve and what that really means, and what that means for people who have children to raise. And in Malta, they're only going to go back to school in September, October. Mm. You know, that's already been decided no matter what. So I think these are really important issues that we haven't found the solutions for, which is what makes them exciting, which is what makes them things we should research, we should look into, and we should test, experiment in, and explore, really. As well as, you know, the whole new opportunities that Annette is pointing out, that we can't keep doing things in the same way. We can't just shift things by a few months, but let's try and fuse things. Let's try and empower people in a different format.
If I may add up to this idea of fusing things, I think this is what we should be doing much more to get rid of people working in their different sectors, and start working together in processes of co-creative innovation. I think this is the task that we need to work on, because this is how our world works in the digital era. So it's no longer, this is the world of science, here is culture, here is economy, and there will be some citizens. But I think we need to see this as an ecosystem of knowledge and an ecosystem of innovation. And if we bring different ways of approaching innovation together, and I think Science in the City Festival does that in a really exciting way, bringing art and science together. Others do that, like Science Gallery Dublin is also an example for people who do that. And I think only if we see each other as important elements of this ecosystem, where everybody has a role, but it's not fighting against each other, only then will it make sense in generating something that is new. So what we are doing right now as well is to create what we call a makeathon, where we invite different actors from science, from economy, from civil society, and from the maker community to work on a challenge that we call open public places. And we want to find out new ways of tackling these challenges that we see today, but in a joint effort, and not just say, okay, here is science, they have all the solutions, and here are the others who can use these solutions and uptake the results. I think this is no longer the approach. And what I also see in this COVID-19 discussion right now is the sense of insecurity that science shows right now, which is inherent in science. I mean, if you know scientific processes, it's just normal. You get new studies, and for COVID-19, you get them almost, a lot of studies almost on a daily basis, which sometimes even contradict each other. That's normal for science, but people don't know that. So I think instead of communicating the results only, even our festivals, we need to communicate that a sense of insecurity is something positive and should make us optimistic that things can change for the better, instead of waiting, give me the results, give me a clear recommendation. That's a big discussion now in Germany. They want like, where is the message? What should I do? What is the next step? And I think we can help with our festival. We can show them it's about discoveries. It's about finding out new solutions and living with a sense of insecurity, which offers new opportunities of thinking and working together. So I think that's a totally different mindset on whether we want to promote STEM to have more engineers in the future who will then solve our problems. I think this is no longer accurate because the engineers cannot solve it on their own. They don't have all the solutions. We need more partners to help us go through this time of like digitalization, insecurities that is coming up, not only in times of viruses, but as a stable, it's a kind of stable insecurity that we will see over the next decades, and it won't go away. And so our science festivals can help people to see, hey, you can explore, you can play, you can try out, but it's about you and your role in all of this. And it's not us as academics giving you the right solution. If we promote that, I think we're totally on the wrong track.
Yeah, and you're reminding me, Annette, this is actually what the SciCulture project stands for. It's getting people who basically don't understand each other's language, you know, a poet, an artist, a philosopher, quantum physicist, an engineer. These people do not understand each other's language. Their method of thinking is very different, and yet they need to work together to solve issues like COVID-19. In SciCulture, we try to use, you know, conflict resolution, focusing people on a specific goal, the design thinking process, adapted to this sort of sphere. And what we've observed is you've got some groups which there's so much conflict, the output that they create tends to be a bit stifled because they don't get very far. There are those that, like, by day 3, they already know what they want to do. It's a 5-day course. It's clear, and they're like, okay, what do we do next? And then there's those that seem to have that conflict, seem to have that balance, and yet can still let go of their own personal ideas enough to come together onto something that actually is really meaningful. And they've come up with some brilliant concepts so a bit of conflict basically is a good thing. That's what we've seen come out of this course. As long as people are willing to let go of their own egos in order to come to this conclusion together. And that's something I feel the world needs to do. You know, recently we've had this call that the world needs to unite in its strategy to develop vaccines for COVID. And yet we had the 2 biggest research powerhouses, the US and China, not being part of that. Probably because they want to be the first who, you know, if China develops the vaccine, it can say, look, we did everything we can to help you. And now there's this vaccine which will produce, you know, it's our gift. You know, we've solved it. So that would take away the negative political consequences we're seeing that is being put on China's shoulders. Whether based on the fake news that it's been created in a human lab, or whether it's based on maybe the real news that there is still a lot of illegal wildlife markets happening that, you know, the Chinese government has tried to enforce, but are still going on, and there's still practices happening which need to be controlled in this incredibly high population density we have, where it's not like, you know, even 400, 700 years ago, within a few years, a virus could spread around millions of people, let alone now when a virus has access to so many eager cells and bodies it can infect. It really needs this concept that, okay, we might not be able to agree on everything, but we are going to agree on some things that we're going to move towards. And you're seeing it in the EU as well, you know. Right now, a major issue coming up is this whole migrants, and how are we going to continue dealing with migrants when we're closing borders? It's a really deep issue, I think. And then how does science communication, public engagement relate to these sort of concepts?
Yeah, and I think something that could really help us there is to see, as you mentioned, Edward, that we have these global challenges. And it could be, if we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, these are accepted by a global community as being the main challenges that we all face together. And there's no Chinese climate and no German climate and no Maltese urban development, but we are all really sitting in the same, well, someone said we're sailing the same storm, but we don't have the same boats. So I really like this image, but we do have the same challenges in our environments. And we see that in terms of coming back to science festivals and science engagement. We are strongly connected, as you see, with the Beijing Science Festival and the Shanghai Science Festival. Both of them suffer the very same challenges that we do. And since we do need to be more digital, we can use this as an opportunity to get together as a global family of colleagues to work on these new solutions. And if we can do it on the virus, we can do it on climate change, on smart cities, on mobility and other issues. So I do see this as an amazing opportunity to see each other as like working all in the same large office, and it's our responsibility now to find solutions together as this community, because so you can see like this quest for knowledge, which has never been as strong as it is now, and it has never been so easy to get together for workshops. Edward may remember in our last EU projects how we traveled like hell. I don't know, in the first 4 months of the project we had like 7 field trips to different countries in Europe and even South Africa and China, which is still nice, of course. But I think if we find ways of getting together more regularly without all hopping on our planes and contributing to emissions and all these things, maybe this is also a learning effect that innovation is still possible, even if we don't meet all the time. We still need to meet, because then you get to know each other better, but maybe not all the time in person. Maybe we can have, again, hybrid ways of meeting, maybe longer meetings once a year, but then the other meetings will be online. So it could change our lives for the better in many ways.
So you've both had some pretty good news about continuing kind of projects and festivals that are still going on. What do you think is going to be the knock-on effect for writing up a grant for future SciCom events and projects, or getting funding from international funding bodies for, do you think there's still going to be that pot available, or do you think there's going to be a bit of a big climate shift to different sorts of SciCom events?
I think the SciCom world right now is going through a very interesting shift. For European science communicators, we've just finished the last, what's called the Science with and for Society funding program of the EU, which was basically our main source of large EU funding. Funded some fantastic projects. The EU is not going to be continuing that. We're not sure exactly how it's going to integrate it in the next funding program called Horizon Europe. I think what that means is that science communicators really, social scientists also, really need to work with other disciplines in order to get funding. It probably means that there's some retraining, some learning how to work with others, not continuing to do what you've done for the last decade, and trying out new concepts of community engagement, community involvement. Can you do that remotely? Are there spaces to do that? And without that adaptation and change, I think the current way of doing things that was being done might not be sustainable for very much longer, because there is, I think, a big drive that science communicators do need to work with other academics, with other professionals, in order to achieve what they want.
And you feel there's going to be a little bit of a, you're going to have to do less with, you're going to have to do more with less nowadays. We're going to have less funding for these sort of things, but you're going to have to just sort of think outside the box. And
but I don't think it's less funding. I think it's a different way of being funded, which I also see as an opportunity. I mean, it's always nice to have your separate small playground in the European Commission's financial environment. And this is how we all behaved. So we had this like Science Within For Society program. So all colleagues rushed to these calls. And so you could see all these public engagement initiatives participating in these kinds of calls. And I think where we need to be is where the real science is, and to be more aware of where are the large research funds. There's also much more money in these fields. If you see it from an economic standpoint, it's better for us to work with the scientists on their research topics, showing them how to increase the impact, how to integrate co-creation, how to involve stakeholders. I found this much more interesting than repeating our approach and redefinitions of what is responsible research and innovation. I find this totally boring right now. It leads nowhere. We had so many projects being funded that lead to nothing, that just repeat recommendations that have already been announced in the very call for the proposal. And I'm so sick of that. I think we really need to get together with the scientists in their different disciplines and bring in our expertise, which we certainly have, into these processes. And this is where the Commission wants to go. I hope they take it seriously so that the evaluators really look for proposals to do that. But it seems to be a development that this is integrated much more. And I really think it was time to get rid of the Science Within For Society calls to allow all of us to think in a different direction. We all hope that it works, but it needs a reframing of the way we work. So if we just repeat what we've always done, and some of these projects, unlike engaging students, even gender or open access, they just repeat. There's nothing new. And if you have this mindset, just give me money for what I've always been doing over the last 15 years, this will be very difficult. So, but if we really have discussions with the scientists, which could be really difficult because we sometimes don't speak the language of scientists, we speak our own language of events and marketing and fun stuff, which is nice, but we must learn to work together with the scientific community much more. And again, if we see this crisis, to me this crisis right now is like a life experiment of how important co-creation is. And when I do trainings now on science communication, all I need to do is relate to what is going on right now, because you can really see science without a context, without being embedded in an ecosystem of knowledge. It doesn't work. It's just numbers, and it could even be dangerous, because if you see some virologists right now who only give the numbers and do not relate it to a different context, then you create animosities, defense mechanisms, and people who no longer want to hear these kind of statistics because they're sick of it. So yeah, I see it as an opportunity, and even to get more money than we ever had before, because of these large research fundings. There are millions and millions of euros. We only need small amounts compared to what research does. So yeah, it can be a challenge, but for the good in the end, for the community. And what I really like about this situation right now is you don't have to pretend that you know everything. Not at all. But you can tell everybody, I don't know. I know that something must happen. I have no idea whether this will work, but let's try it. And this is what people who are very firm about digitalization, which I'm not, but this is what they keep telling us. Yeah. The world of digitalization is about not knowing. It's about playing, experimenting, trying out new stuff and failing and trying it again. And in these times, even scientists whose proposals have been rejected several times because they didn't show the impact of what they're doing, They are insecure. They don't know what to do. And we have to reorganize ourselves. We don't know what to do. And maybe even other sectors like culture, they don't really know what to do with all of this. And we can either now all stay at home, be really frustrated and be depressed and say, let's wait for better times, going back to normal. And to me, it's like, I don't want to go back to normal at all. I want to go back to something different, maybe together with them and say, okay, we know our field. So we know how to engage people. We know how to communicate, how to do events, how to engage. Okay, you know science and you may know something about arts and, you know, so, and maybe together we can create something that is really new instead of fighting for our sectors.
And the science communication community, public engagement has suffered in COVID. You know, as we mentioned, so many events, people have lost their jobs, freelance practitioners, same as cultural sector, they can't go into schools anymore, they're closed. So people have suffered, and these new ways of thinking, of interacting, of coming together, I think is a really good message and really important to push. Apart, obviously, from, you know, governments do need to support in this time of crisis. But I think that call that you mentioned, Annette, that let's not support just how we did things in the past, so this blows over and we continue doing things, but let's use this as a time of reflection, as a time for research, experimentation, innovation, in order to come up with new ways of being, both in public engagement and both car manufacturing or whatever.
But I think it's also what we can foster with our festivals and in all science engagement is this new understanding or broader understanding of innovation. And this is why and I know I'm repeating myself, but I don't like this STEM approach only, because I really see this as a danger when it comes to communicating what science can do in the society. And I see this coming in even regional funding policies and programs, that you have to define your notion of innovation, including social innovation, as something that is totally beneficial. And this may also help us to see things in a new way on is innovation only growing markets and a growing economy and having rising numbers of products that we sell? Or is innovation something that is also in this European sense, that is interconnected and that is needs to be sustainable in order to survive? Because if just like faculties shouldn't work one against each other, or disciplines even, it's the same like for nations and countries in these times. And we can see this again in this crisis. If we have this very nationalistic approach, it's not going to work. And if it's only fostering technological solutions, it's also not going to work. But if we only look at creativity and arts, this is also not enough, because the whole motor needs to be running. So I think we need a better understanding of this interconnectivity of this system that we have. And when it comes to Europe, I do see the way we have developed as a European network, or as a European community of nations. I see this as the best way I see right now to cope with that, because you do have these strong communities and identities and regional hubs which work with their populations, with their histories, their languages, their culture. But at the same time, we are connected. And I think this is something so precious that even in our science festivals, maybe we can be more international also in the way we think, and see, okay, this challenge is not just a local one, but the guys in Malta have the same problem as we do here in the rural region or in others. So this could be really a big opportunity in this digital field. And the kids already do that. If you look at kids using the web and using games and stuff, they're already connected. They're already doing that. And maybe we should integrate that more into the way we engage.
Yeah, you're raising some really important points here, Annette. I mean, like, for whom are we engaging? For whom are we communicating? Is it for our funder? Is it for the government? Is it for the scientist, whoever that is? Is it for the business? Is it for the better of society? What does that even mean in our concept? I think this crisis has really helped start that process of reflection, critical reflection of where the community is going, what changes we've been seeing, and where innovation, in a certain sense, in science communication happens.
Something that works well, and having this diversity in Europe is a good thing, as long as we do learn from each other. So, but if we only see that to take the best for us, I think this is not, again, this is not really working. So also when it comes to financial support. So I do think we need to see each other as a community that needs to do stuff together. But then we also have some really moving personal encounters in these times where we think digitalization makes everything so abstract and not personal. I think many of us have had so many moving personal encounters on the screen over the last weeks that this is also a symbol, or we had Chinese friends who were sending us masks to Germany because we needed them at that time. And so we had like this Chinese family. You may remember Fulin from Beijing, Edward. So he and his family, he got together and asked his friends, do we still have masks? So they put them all together and sent them over to Germany. So these are like, the world is getting so much smaller, I think, in these days, that, I don't want to be too optimistic. I see the challenges for a lot of people and for a lot of people who work in the field of science engagement. But I think all we can do now is take the best of what the situation offers us. And I think since people see the importance of science right now, this is the time for us to emphasize this and to say, okay, guys, this is something very serious. It's not just about organizing a festival and have fun on the streets. And so we'll have the fun next year and just move it. But to me, science communication and science engagement is something very, very serious and connected to the big challenges that we had even before COVID-19. And I think we need to show this to people that, of course, you should have fun. It's a festival and it's about enjoying stuff and doing stuff. But if this is our message, science is fun and do things with your hand, I think this is totally not enough in these times, and maybe has never been enough to begin with.
So really, we've seen this just as an opportunity to reach out to science communicators in different ways and just sort of manage to reach people right now who need good information and just to learn from how to take in what they need and use that information responsibly. It's been really interesting talking to you both. I think we're kind of running a bit long now, so thank you very much for both of your time today, and thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you very much, Chris. It's been really nice to talk to you and to you, Annette, to share these thoughts and concepts on where the future lies, really.